Hey, good morning. Yes, it is. It is Thursday, the 26th. Hopefully, most of you have survived Christmas. Some of you are still on holiday because I know some places shut down from Christmas through New Year's. We're working today. Uh, we did take yesterday off, but we spent that time working on Cloud side-by-side tires. And then most of the day found me in bed with this bug going around that from the shakes to just feeling like crap. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, in the world of business, we have customers, right? And what do you do and how do you handle that customer that you fix something and then they come back? Yep, hang tight. Hey, welcome back to the channel. If you didn't already know it, my name is Eric, and yes, this is the weekday, Monday through Friday. Today is Thursday, the 26th, the day after Christmas, and we're almost to New Year's, right, to 2025. So what are we talking about today? Look, if you repair people's machines, you are going to get more than one customer that brings that machine back saying, it was working good, but now it doesn't. And how do you handle those customers? What's the best policy of handling those customers? Well, the first thing I look at, is it back for the same issue or is it a new issue? You know, we're not God. We can't see every issue with a machine, right? And we can't foresee issues down the road. Because once it leaves the shop, it's out of our hands. Now, the way I approach it is it the same issue? If it's the same issue, then Claude and I do a little back and forth of, did we miss something? Or is the customer using it in a certain way this causing it to have this issue? See, now, if we have a unit come in and we've got compression, we've got fire, got air, fuel is an unknown, all right? If you physically did not put the fuel in that tank, it's an unknown. And honest to God, it's an unknown even if you put fuel in it. A lot of times what happens is if we find a unit that comes in with water in the fuel, is the first thing we do is we drain the excess water out. Or better yet, we dump the fuel. That way we know we're starting with a given. We also use PRI-G, which was Jason's recommendation. For every 5 gallons of fuel we pick up to have go through the shop, we treat it. Is it cost a little bit more? Yeah, but so far we've seen less issues. But the thing you can't control is once the unit leaves your shop and it goes home, is the customer running it out of fuel and putting their fuel back in it, which is sat for over a year in the garage. So why is that a problem? Well, if the machine came in and we drained the fuel, it had good compression, had good fire, air filter looked good, that's the unknown. So if we drain the fuel, put our fresh fuel in, 91 octane, treated with our PRI-G, and the sucker runs, that tells me that it had bad fuel, right? Should be. But what you can't control is once it goes home and the customer has it, of running it out of your fuel and saying it ran great, but they failed to mention was that it ran great until it was out of fuel. They put fuel in it, and now it's an issue again. See, these small engines weren't made to run on water ethanol, and water ethanol gas. They aren't. If we can make these suckers run on water, or you can make one run on water, hey, you're going to be a multimillionaire in no time. So that's what we look at is it something that the customer is doing on their end? And if it came in because it had an issue with the fuel and we didn't have to tear the carburetor apart or do other things other than just doing our normal compression, fire, fuel, and air, that's the first thing we check. So if it comes back, and I will tell a customer, look, I was honest with you when I let it go, that your biggest issue was water in the fuel, and is caused by using ethanol fuel, untreated ethanol fuel, that's sat for a period of time, that's allowed to gain moisture, which is water. And very few customers will admit, I'm telling you right now, that they ran out of fuel and put fresh fuel of theirs in it. I have a handful of customers that would own it, but the bulk of them, they would still cry foul because all they care about is their machine isn't running right, and in order to get it running right, they're going to have to spend more money. Well, I can tell them, take it home, drain the fuel, go to the gas station, get 91 octane, treat it, and then pour it in and see if you see a difference. Or I can bring it into the shop. Claude can drain the fuel. We'll put fresh fuel in it. And if it fires right up, depending upon who that customer is, because you have different levels of customers, right? You have the ones that are with you through thick and thin, that are great customers. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have the customers that only bring the machine to you when they're having problems, and they bitch and complain about it the whole time. If you're one of our better customers, I'm just going to tell you, look, we drained the fuel tank, put fresh fuel. I'm not going to bill you for it. Here. For 3/4 of the way down that list and to the bottom, I'm going to charge you an hour's labor, cost of the fuel, and if there's any pickup or drop off. Because we cannot control what goes on once it goes home, right? So why should we eat it? Like I say, I eat it with my better customers that we see for a spring or fall service. They always keep their machines, going good. And if they have any problems, we're the first one they call. For the ones that just show up and it's a hit or miss, bill them. Because they may not ever come back. Depends on if they have problems. So that's the first thing I look at. Is it something that came through with an issue with fuel? And if you've watched any of my videos, you'll find that one of the first things Claude does is take that unknown out. And that is he drains the carburetor and he drains the fuel tank into a container. He puts fresh fuel in and allows it to work its way into the carburetor. If it's got a fuel pump on it, you crank it a couple times, it'll fill the carburetor. And if it takes right off and runs perfect, it's your fuel. It's got to be your fuel because you checked everything else, right? So that's one thing you have to kind of keep in mind. Other issues is, let's say somebody burning a deck belt up on their lawnmower. Now, if it's a given and it's a regular customer, they're not abusing their machine. They have value in that machine. That machine brings value. It gets the grass cut every year, has regular maintenance every year. You treat it good, keep the blades sharpened or replaced, yada, yada, yada. But we've had those customers in the past that come in and smoked a deck belt and we've put a brand new one on it, even the Kevlar belts, and we see them a couple days later and they've smoked that belt again. Now, your first thought would be, did we get the belt run correctly using the inside of the guides? Because if you get on the outside of the guides, you could take a belt out. Did we miss something on a pulley? You know, is there a pulley that's not working correctly or bent or something? If we find those things, then it's haha on me, right? Because we missed something. But what we have found is, I have found, especially with Claude, is he doesn't miss that stuff. He's checking that stuff. And then come to find out that this person's lawn is a foot tall and they're trying to mow it with a lawnmower. Yes, with a lawnmower. We actually have one guy that would let his hayfield get so high, and he had a bagger system on it, and he would start mowing that just enough to feed the cows. Green grass. Yes. And he would use an old Sabre lawnmower, and we would get a call at least 3 times a year that he burnt a brand new belt up on his Sabre. And it wasn't till the second or third when we dropped it off that we realized, you know, and we asked, what are you doing? Are you mowing that with this mower? Well, yeah, I got to feed the cows. Look, I'm a farmer too, and I have specialized equipment to feed the cows. Not a frickin' lawnmower with a bagger on it. You know, if you're doing your lawn on a regular basis and you're taking the stuff that's gone into the bag for the cows, that's one thing. But allowing your hayfield to get to a certain height before you start cutting it with a lawnmower, here's a good word for you: flail chopper. That's what we use in the industry of raising cows. So yeah, operator error. You have to really start looking, and what is that customer using it for? If they're using it for something above and beyond what the machine is made for, it's on them. And we all had a good laugh over it. But I told him, no more freebies on the belt. You're paying for the belt and the time it takes. He says, I ain't got a problem with that. And I said, you probably could use a brand new or a sharpened set of blades for that thing. Because with you trying to mow a hayfield. And I had one guy that was a lawn care guy. And he was just starting into the business. And he was taking on any job that he could get. And he got hooked up with a bank that had repossessed properties. And they had hired him to go to the repossessed properties that they had and start mowing their yards. And bless his heart, he'd end up with hayfields at these properties to start with. And it was hard on the machines that he was using it for. And I would tell him, look, what you need is a brush hog. You know, buy yourself a small compact tractor, get a brush hog it first, then rake it up, and then mow it. Eventually he did, but at the time he couldn't afford to invest in a compact, so he was just running a regular Tractor Supply, Lowe's, Home Depot lawnmower and trying to do the best he could because he was trying to get customers. You got to be careful because a lot of times they'll put you into circumstances that you shouldn't be in if you're a lawn care person because you're really looking for the work and you don't have a lot of clients yet. Pick and choose who you sign on with. And then you have that customer that something isn't doing what they think is right. They decide that they are a mechanic, small engine repair mechanic, and decide to fix it on their own. We had one instance of where we had a guy drop off a lawnmower, and I can't remember what the issue was, but it came in. I'm pretty sure it came in for a service, and we went from front to back on it, and we picked it up and we dropped it off. He said he went out to use it, and it wouldn't move. So first thing that pops in your head is it a hydrostatic, and is the wire in the back pushed in? Because when you pull and lock it, it disengages, transmission, so you can push it, right? So that was our first question, which I've never seen Claude miss one before, but well, maybe that happened. So I'm asking the customer on the phone, is that thing pushed in? He said yes. And I said, and it doesn't drive? He said, no, ever since it got dropped off, it wouldn't drive. What he failed to say, because it was an old manual transmission, was that he had a flat tire, and he knew we weren't open, and he took it to a local gas station that put a tube in it, and he put the tire back on. But the real problem was he didn't put the keyway back in when he put the tire back on. And the keyway is what drives your tires. So the shaft was just spinning inside that tire. And the other one isn't going to drive unless that one's driving, right? So if you have that philosophy in your shop that the customer's always right, you're wrong. Because customers will not tell you if they've done something wrong. Very few of them will. And the worst of the worst is the ones that have tried to fix it and then brought it in and it's missing parts. Where are the other parts? Well, I don't know. I may have dropped a few things. So what else would you run into for challenges? But the key thing I'm trying to get across to you is a lot of times when it comes back or a customer calls and says that it's not working properly after you've touched it, is on their end. It's not on your end. If you're running a decent shop and you've got a decent mechanic, are you going to make mistakes once in a while? Absolutely. None of us are perfect. And I know that. But, there's always a but, right? You have to do it case by case. And you have to be the investigator. You have to figure out what went wrong, the chain of events that caused the issue. And sometimes it's like pulling teeth when it comes to customers, of having them admit that they did anything to that machine. It wasn't only until after we went and got that lawnmower that Claude said the keyway's missing out of it. That's his biggest problem. And that's the first thing Claude looked for. So when I approached the customer and I said, look, there's a keyway that fits in that shaft on that rear tire. And if that keyway is missing, that shaft is going to spin inside the tire. And the other side will not drive because it's looking to drive from that side. You see what I'm saying? And the customer finally admitted, well, yeah, I had a flat tire. I knew you guys weren't open, so I just went over to the garage. I put a new tube in it. I threw it back on, and I didn't know there was a keyway there. Well, okay, that's on you. And I'm going to bill you for it. If they're willing to tell you they did something like that. We've had customers that just stood their ground and were adamant they didn't do anything with it, and it was all our fault. If the evidence is there, like a missing keyway, and it was Claude didn't have that axle off, that tire off, while it was here and it was driving all over the place, we know exactly what took place. And yes, I billed that customer. But every shop is going to have this happen. You have your own stories. You have your own stories of what different customers have brought to you and the issues they so-called had once it was returned, right? If you've been at it very long. And you have to kind of pick and choose. If they're a really good customer and it doesn't cost you much to get it right, maybe a fuel issue, tell them what it is, tell them to go get some fresh fuel, even offer to give them some of your PRI-G to put in it when they get that new can of fuel, and get rid of the old fuel. And you'll have less problems down the road. So keep that in mind if you're starting a shop or running a shop. If you're running a shop, you probably already run into this. So the last thing I got, just to kind of highlight, I had a chance the last couple of days of checking the Small Engine Repair Facebook group, and they had a post of a guy saying he was new and had run a shop for 30 years, and why wasn't his post showing up when he was trying to help people because he thought he could be of help. And I couldn't believe the responses, from the guys of, my grandfather said, you might better let people think you're ignorant than open your mouth and confirm it. And that's what they did on this channel, on this Facebook group, is the 6 comments that I saw were ignorant comments, were comments from people that I know have never run a shop, because had they run a shop, they would have had same instance. One guy said, you're going to get that guy that runs to his toolbox and grabs his compression tester, and that's wasted energy and time. No, it's not. If you're not doing that first, I got news for you. Or it's the guy that says that, it's the valves, you got to check the valves. And I've worked on lawnmowers and small engines all my life, and I've never had to adjust one set of valves. That's bullshit. You just told me you haven't worked on very many. Because I would say a quarter of the machines that come through here, the valves are out of adjustment. And a lot of times you'll get that popping noise or hard start. That's your valves. Or you have no compression or low compression, and that's the valves. Most machines have overhead valves. And if you haven't figured out or learned how to do the valves and adjust clearance on the valves, you might want to learn. So that showed me he was ignorant. And the other guy, they're going to run and say that you need an ultrasonic cleaner instead of just cleaning the carburetor. I'll tell you, the ultrasonic cleaner has saved me time and money. And it does work. Is it an added expense for the toolbox build? Yes. But it will eventually pay itself off depending on how much equipment you work on. If you're working on just your own, you're probably already taking care of that unit and making sure you got good fuel in it. And you're not running into the issues that we see of varnish carburetors and so forth. But if you're running a shop or working on somebody else's, after your main set of tools, it is something nice to have. Do you have to have one? No. But it does add value in the shop. We've tried gunk in a can where you take the carburetor and just drop it in. But we've seen better results from the ultrasonic because you can add and put it inside a glass jar, or depending upon what you're using for a cleaning agent, just a Ziploc bag, and then drop it into the water solution. You don't need to have the whole solution what you want to use for a cleaner. If you want to use gas, you can put gas in a jar, drop your carburetor in it, take your pieces apart, your bowl and stuff like that, but drop that into the ultrasonic cleaner inside that jar filled with gas. And the ultrasonic will still work through that glass jar and clean that unit without making the whole unit just right full of goop. If you're filling it with water and using their additive, you're going to spend a lot of time cleaning that unit. Whereas, watch a few YouTube videos of these guys that are using it constantly. And they got some great ideas on coming up with different solutions, different containers to put it in, and still using the water that's inside that unit. So I'm going to start wrapping this up. Wait, what kind of stories do you guys have that are running a shop? You know, because I know that we're not unique in that you have your good customers and bad customers. And a lot of times people hate to admit when they're wrong. It's more common than not. Me, I could give a rat's ass. So if I'm wrong, I'll tell you I'm wrong. If you're telling me a certain way, yeah, I screwed up. Haha, you know. But that's the way I learn, is by screwing up and having somebody show me the correct way. So on that note, you guys have a great day, and we'll catch you here bright and early tomorrow morning. Again, thanks so much for being part of the channel and watching and commenting. It means a lot to me.